Hey guys, Emma Ramey back at ya.
And Max McQueen, also still here. So, as we enter another week, we get, everybody's starting to get worn down. There's a lot of stuff that's been put on hold. We all know that. We just want to update you guys, if you haven't heard already, online classes for the summer. Online. They're going to be online. All classes will be online. So if you were anticipating potentially meeting in person, that won't be happening anymore, which is unfortunate. But Em and I are optimistic about the fall. There's rumors floating around on what will happen. But we have a sovereign God who's in control, and we're excited to see what August has in store for us.
Yeah, like Max said, a lot of things are uncertain right now, but we do just encourage you guys to continue fighting for community. And one of those things is thinking about Project MHK this summer and knowing that that community is still there for you via Zoom, via whatever is necessary. And so we just encourage you to keep fighting to be connected with humans and stay in touch with each other. And Max also said, we don't know what the fall is going to bring, but we do know that God is sovereign and He is in control of that time, and it's going to be to glorify Him. And so we just pray that you not only stay connected to humans, but that you just keep abiding in Christ. And He's our hope, and He's the thing that's not going anywhere. So just keep trusting Him. And as we get ready to hear from Robbie, we also get to hear from Barry Parker, Steve Radcliffe, and Dick Jaques. And I'm just really excited. Those are the three pastors in Manhattan at the churches, and so I encourage you guys to stick through it all and just soak in their wisdom. So, Max, you want to pray for us?
Absolutely. Thanks, Emma. God, as we come to you, just another week, they seem to be drawn out and long and testing and lonely at times. And God, as we meet through social media and engage in the best way we know how, we just ask that you calm our hearts and allow us to focus and engage in the material we're learning, whether that's school or faith development. God, we're excited to hear this week from some amazing pastors in the Manhattan community. And as we do, God, I just ask that you speak through them and reveal truth to us. Let that truth be peace for our hearts and our souls. And God, that we can be optimistic and really put our hope and joy in you first and foremost before anything else. Pray for this time. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, hello, Christian Challenge, and welcome to this week's Table Talk. And I've been looking forward to this week since we got it on the calendar and got the guests that we have committed. We have some really special guests. Steve Ratliff is with us from Faith Free, and Dick Jaques from New Hope Church, and Barry Park from University Christian Church are joining us. So we are so glad to be together. And I know that this doesn't cover all of the students in Challenge, but most students in Challenge are I think most of them are part of one of your three churches. So we're really excited for you all to be with us. So I wanted to start off with just kind of getting an update from you guys on how you're doing personally, and tell us, Steve, let's start with you. How are you, and how's Faith doing?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Robbie. So I feel like on the whole, I'm doing pretty well. I kind of toggle back and forth between awesome and horrible sometimes. It seems like I've got high highs and low lows. Honestly, it's been a challenging time for me. I am very extroverted, and so I get energized by being with people. And most of the things I love about being a pastor involve face-to-face meetings. And so all that's migrated to screens and technology. And so for me, that is just exhausting, and it's been a pretty disorienting time for me. And at times it's revealed some of the ugliness in my heart it's revealed things I trust in besides God. And so emotionally, I've been kind of a mess up and down. But I don't really wallow in self-condemnation, so it hasn't, so I haven't really stayed there when things surface. It seemed like God's Spirit pushes me back to God and toward the Word, and so I'm learning some great things in the process. Is that fair enough?
That's great. That's
okay.
great. Give us an update too on how you feel like your church is doing. How's faith?
Yeah, probably a mixed bag. It's hard to tell. Our leadership, like most churches, is making phone calls to as many people as we can. And some people are really thriving spiritually. Some of them have a lot slower pace, and their jobs they're able to back off those that aren't in medical professions and caring professions. And so some people are able to spend a lot more time seeking God in their families, reaching out to people in their community through their work. We're doing groups, everything online, of course, services and groups online. And so some people are staying connected really, really well in that way. Other people, I think, are realizing, I'm really good at going to church, but I'm not sure I'm really good at walking with God on my own. And so it's exposing some deficiencies, in some. And so that's probably the best read I have.
That's good. Dick, what about you? And tell us about how New Hope's doing too.
Yeah, I'm kind of in Steve's boat from the standpoint I have my melancholy moments, and because I like to be personally connected with people. I think at the beginning of this whole time was challenging to me because I'm not tech savvy. So I was watching webinars for hours, and I just felt like a total failure, and that didn't help my melancholy temperament. And then I listened to a podcast that Brian Sturm sent me by Ruth Haley Barton about how she struggled with that very thing. Like she had to come out with this really powerful little podcast about stuff, but she went and spent time with God, and that really helped her. But it was a challenge to me, was to make sure that my heart was right and use this time to grow in my own relationship with God as well. It's just sink my roots down even deeper. And it's been really a sweet time for the most part. I do miss people. I think as far as how the church is doing, I think one of the things that I do enjoy are those conversations with people, just meeting people on the phone or Zoom. That's not my favorite thing, but it's better than nothing. I do walk around the neighborhood and do see people and talk with them, and that's been enjoyable. I think one of the exciting things is seeing people who just were burning the candle on both ends, and their kids were taking them in 20 different directions. And now they've had the opportunity to slow down, and they've realized how their life was just kind of out of order. Their soul was just not in a restful place. So I've heard several people that talked about, oh, if I just got that right in my job, and if I just had that right in my home, then life would be good. But now what I'm hearing is, I just need to get my soul right. And that's been really encouraging to me. And I think for the most part, our church is doing well. We don't have a lot of people that have lost jobs, so that helps us as far as people being pretty good. I think there's those who are singles that are missing, personal contact, probably a lot more than others. So they're my big concern.
No, that's good. Barry, what about you?
Well, I'm doing really well. I started out the first few weeks just checking in, trying to figure out what do we need to do? What's next? I mean, we were already fairly strong on our online presence. And so as a result, that didn't worry me as much as just going, how do we connect people and how do I stay connected? And so I was in a kind of almost a just idea of running and pushing and driving for that first few weeks. It had me pretty tired because there were just, while we were online, we didn't have children's church online. We didn't have youth groups online. We didn't have, and so we had services. And so it was a major change as far as just personally. I've been blessed because I've got to connect with my family really well. I've been able to stay connected with some of my close friends and different, whether it be through Zoom, through phone calls. I still work in the office with my executive minister, who's been a friend for going on 30 years now. And so that helps. And as far as my own personal time with God, I think has been just, there's been some very fresh times, kind of like what Steve described. We're all exposed right now. This is exposed what our foundation is, and it's exposed where our churches, are they healthy? Are they not? Are marriages healthy or not? I remember one of the ladies in our church early on said that she's like, I thought we had a pretty good marriage, but I'm at home all the time with him now, and it's gotten a little rough. She said, I'm not used to having to talk this much to him, and I'm getting annoyed. And it was kind of funny. Our church, though, it has been just amazing. The response and how they've, because our total audience has probably doubled, if not tripled or more, in the reach that we have right now. And I've been blown away by that. And so I've just been, the opportunity that has been there has been different in terms of just allowing me to see, wow, God is so much bigger than just our Sunday morning gatherings. And I think that's something that we all need to learn and just realize. He's so much bigger than just a one event and how we might put him in a box.
That's good. It's so good to hear from all of you guys. I feel like I'm so blessed to just kind of be in a Zoom room with the three of you. I just have such respect for all of you. I want to kind of ask each of you one question that would be, I think, more fitting for each of just who God's made you and and your role in our community. But I'll just go in the same order. So, Steve, I know that the last couple years you've been really leaning into trying to learn and grow your prayer life. And I just wonder if you sense that God's been putting anything unique on your heart to pray during this time.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if it's unique, but a real emphasis has been praying for people that need Christ. The past fall, our leadership started this discipline of praying regularly for the people that are in our lives. We use this acronym, FRANC. Have y'all heard of that? FRANC. God loves acronyms, right? But it's friends, relatives, acquaintances, neighbors, and coworkers. All my coworkers are Christians, so I get an exemption on that one. But so you pray for different people differently, and so I've been praying for these people pretty faithfully, and because of investing time in that, I find it a lot more natural to reach out to them relationally in different ways. And so this year, I decided, okay, I've been praying for these people. I'm going to invite them to join us online for Easter, and nobody ever accepts my Easter invitation. Seriously, I can't think of a single person who showed up. I mean, they just stay away in droves. So I invited almost everybody on my Frank list, and most of them came. I mean, I invited my brothers, and that was a huge risk. And my closest pre-Christian friends, and and I think 11 or 12 of them, joined us online. The response was varied. Some thought it was great. Some were quite offended at, these shocking things, basic things about the gospel, that we talk about. And part of it, I think it's easier to invite people to an online service. You can sit on your couch and join us. But I also believe it's partially in response to prayer. I believe God answers prayer. So I just, sometimes I think, okay, I'm going to pray about things that I'm pretty sure God can pull off. And if I can kind of figure out how it might happen, I'll pray for it. But when you pray for somebody to come to Christ, I mean, it's just, God has to do it. He's got to reach into their life and into their heart. And so I think it's really it's really increased my faith just to pray. I don't have to figure it out. I'm asking God to do what I could never do. And so just burden for people that need Christ. That's probably it.
Steve, that reminds me of my my Greek class in seminary when we were going through our vocab one day, and he's talking about the word for power, and he was talking about he talked about Romans 1:16 that I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it's the power of God. He says this Greek word for power is dynamo. And he said, and he looked at us, he said, please don't ever preach that the gospel is the dynamite of God, because, we get our word dynamite from there. So sorry if that, I don't know if you've ever preached that, but that's just what he said to us. Then he made this comment that he said, for God to speak and for the seas to calm, for the sky to send rain, for creation to obey his command is the easiest. It's so natural. It's just normal. But for a rebellious heart, for a dead heart to come to life, or to turn away from itself to choose God, he said it's the hardest thing that God does. Yeah. And he takes all the power of God in this gospel. And I don't know, he's my language professor, not my theology professor, because I remember thinking, I was like, what does that mean? The hardest thing that God does is there, but I just, it was so impactful for me to think about all the power of God, in this gospel, to see a changed life. That's what I was thinking of when you were talking about, just praying, praying for dead hearts to come to life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And and the Great Commission is the primary tool in spiritual warfare, right? God's going to retake the nations. It happens through the gospel. And so it is a tooth and nail battle, to see people come to Christ. And Paul said, we're the aroma of Christ, so some aroma from life to life, others death to death. And so we got to be prepared for that. But yeah, staying engaged and being full of faith that God can reach people.
Yeah, cool. Well, Dick, I'm going to move on to you. I know you have a background just with counseling and really great with inner life. And so what I wanted to ask you is, what has been your concern, or maybe your hope, for how this season could be affecting the inner life of the believer?
I think my prayer for this season is the prayer in Ephesians 1, is that they would know or understand or get revelation of God's wisdom in the true knowledge of who he is, the hope of his calling, the power of the resurrection. And so in these times of kind of loneliness, and maybe even times of stillness, what do I do now? I'm not having to work like I was, so that the pace is slowed down. So my prayer and hope is that people will come to know God for who he is. And when we started this series on we're going to do it, or we're doing it on the attributes of God. And the title is, "But who do you say I am?" comes after Jesus fed the 5,000, and then he asked the disciples, "Well, who do people say that I am?" And they responded, and then Jesus asked, "But who do you say I am?" So each and every one of us has the opportunity to know God. Wow. What a privilege. And what an answer to our heart's cry. So I've talked to people that, I mean, Barry said it earlier about marriages, but talking to people about their marriages, talking to lonely people, talk to somebody today that's just carrying something that's just too heavy for them, but they haven't shared it with anyone. So just the loneliness, and then how this time is when people are home, stuff has risen to the surface that needs to be dealt with. But I'm excited that they're dealing with it. That's the encouraging thing. It's the people that keep that stuff hidden and stowed away, that like it's not, oh, it'll just go away. But now they have the opportunity to know the King of Kings, that he is the hope for their soul.
Well, thanks for sharing, Dick. That's, yeah, if God would use the silence or the stillness, the lack of activity, maybe to kind of bring stuff to the surface and get it out, that'd be. Well, Barry, I think, one way that God seems to continue to use you is just to cast a vision. Just seems to, he's kind of wired you that way to be a real visionary. And I'm just wondering if you feel like God's been putting any steam in your heart around a vision that of what he might be doing during this time.
Yeah. While I know that much of those who would attend our churches and those who don't attend our churches would see this pandemic as such a negative thing, I got to be honest, as a pastor, in many ways, I see it as an extremely positive thing. It's like a springboard for the faith. I remember back to when I went through 9/11 as a church, and it was so sad, of course, as a pastor, and seeing those towers come down, seeing the tragedy and hearing those stories, and there was so much fear around the nation. But here's the thing. Incredible revival came out of 9/11. I mean, churches across America were all of a sudden exploding. People were hungry for the gospel and were willing to listen who weren't willing to listen. And people were, here's the real thing, people in the church were willing to share who were normally just kind of sitting back in their comfort zone going, I don't want to share my faith. All of a sudden they did. And that just changes everything. The church started being the church. And I see that happening right now. And so for our unique setting and several of my friends that I keep in contact with around the nation and similar settings, there is an explosion of people who are jumping in and watching and listening for the first time. And people who are sharing their faith and becoming well, they're starting to be the witness that they're called to be all along, and I'm excited about that. I had just a buddy over the weekend as I was preparing the messaging, because it's so easy to think, oh, can't do things now. We believe strongly that a great response to the gospel we see over and over and over in the Bible is baptism. It's just water. There's nothing magic, but my first instinct, we had this big service plan for the weekend, and my instinct was to go for just a moment, shoot, we can't have our baptism weekend. And I went, wait a second. we have more baptismals available right now than anywhere else. The baptism per baptismal per person higher is way more, called a bathtub, and right in everybody's home. And so we did this over the weekend, and I had one of my buddies who had a split home in faith. It had been really painful, and it had been a real division. He texted me just a picture, and excuse me, it really caught me off guard. It was just so beautiful. And all I saw was the back of his head and him bringing his wife up out of the bathtub, and that he was baptized. And it was just so beautiful to get. I got to celebrate. And that kind of stuff is happening. And so for me right now, I'm stoked for the message that is going out around the nation right now. Now, I want to say on twofold. I'm really hurting for some of my friends that are in smaller churches that weren't set up, that weren't ready, that didn't have some of this. And I have some, it's like, I have a family member who's a pastor in a small church of about, 40 people on Sunday. He is a faithful, godly man. And now for him, this was devastating. And it took him a couple of weeks to figure out how to have somebody hold a phone and just try and get it going. And so it's been really hard on him. But overall, I see this as a time of hope, because people are desperate for hope. And all of a sudden, it's causing us to, as pastors and as churches and as Christians, to look at our own faith and say, am I going to practice what I've been preaching? And as I practice what I preach, it comes out differently. The churches start to come out differently. And all of a sudden, people are starting to do what we were really called to do all along when we were hiding in churches. We're kicked out of the churches. And just like the early church, when they were kicked out, all kinds of good things happened in Acts. And they ran and they were all gone. And all of a sudden what happened, what looked like a tragedy became a victory for the faith. And so that's kind of where I am. I'm really kind of excited about it. It's going to change how we do church, even when we come back. I mean, some of my long range planning has totally been flipped upside down in the last couple of months. And so I'm excited just about what God is teaching me through this, and what he's teaching the church, and what I see across the nation. I mean, I was reading about one pastor, and as he shared kind of what was going on in his church, and how the first week, where he had normally would have several thousand views online, it went to tens of thousands. And then the next week, it went to literally over 100,000. And so it was just exploding. And that's kind of what we saw as well here. And so the first week when I was like, oh man, what's happened? And I asked one of our guys, I'm like, this has probably been, I can't even imagine how the audience has probably shrunk. They're at home. And instead, he's like, oh no, I'm trying to figure out how to read this data because we exploded this weekend. I'm like, what? And then that's when God started stirring me to realize, hey, what we see as a tragedy is often one of the best things that could ever happen spiritually. It's just we got to hold loosely this world. We got to hold loosely the comforts of this world, the desires of this world, and hold tightly to the eternal ones. And so as the church does that, the church is going to be fine.
Great. That's awesome. Yeah, I have to keep reminding myself too. I mean, I love being able to walk through life knowing Jesus. This is one of those times where I'm like, man, how would you, because whenever I start to get stressed, and I just keep reminding myself, like, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I know the one who holds all the tomorrows in his hands. And so that's been an anchor for me just to remember that. So, okay, so I'm just going to go around. We'll keep the same order, but I just want to give one more question to you guys, and this just kind of whatever's on your heart. What would you want to share with the students out there listening? Some of them are part of your church, some of them maybe not, but just what would be on your heart for students today? Steve, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, the thing that really on my heart is just acknowledging that this is probably a time of real loss for most of your students, this time of distancing. And I know Challenge well enough to know that for the vast majority of your students, there's this intense fellowship, just daily. You may be living with other believers and you study the word together, you pray, you pray with your close Christian friends, and there's this, you're trusting God for big things, and now there's this huge void. And it strikes me that what your students are experiencing now is what many people experience after they graduate from college. And many of them experience it for years, some people for a lifetime. You know, so I came to Christ in college, and it was through a campus ministry. I was heavily involved. This was at Southern Miss and then at LSU. And it was just this intense discipleship experience. And it was a day-by-day thing. And we're kind of up for anything. You know, hey, you want to have an all-night prayer meeting? I'm like, sure, I don't have class till 7:30 in the morning. So pray all night and then sleep through your class the next day. It was just perfect, you know. And a lot of your students are experiencing that kind of intensity. And what often happens is that students will graduate from college and go from that to going to church once a week. And it's not a mystery why for many students, they peak spiritually in college, and it's this long, slow decline. And I mean, I've known tons of people that went to K-State. I talked to a couple this past week that graduated from K-State a few years ago, and they're not doing well. They're isolated, and they are not doing well in their marriage. Anyway, my heart goes out. So my encouragement to you is to anticipate that drop off and purpose in your heart to find genuine biblical fellowship once you leave. And now's the time to prepare for that, develop these disciplines. And I think Challenge does it well. One of the things I appreciate about Challenge is that you value the local church, and your students are involved in church, and you're serving in churches. And so you're setting yourself up well for post-college days. But just know churches aren't always the best at facilitating this type of thing. Again, we're really good at putting people in rows, you know, on Sundays. But this type of fellowship is possible. There are honest spiritual relationships out there. I encourage you to not settle what you're experiencing at K-State in Challenge. It exists out there. And that's the pattern. That's not icing on the cake. That's the pattern in the Bible. Encourage one another day after day, as long as it's still called today, Hebrews 3. And so anticipate that, and expect God to provide that for you after college. Great.
Dick, what about you? What would be on your heart to share with students?
Well, I know that so many of the students, they're home. And when I went home, it's kind of like what Steve was saying. I didn't do as well because I didn't have my friends, my comrades. But I was always challenged, and you know, Bob Anderson was the challenge director when I was there, and he just talked about being a servant. And I remember going home for breaks or like summer with a challenge to serve. And you just can't look at the life of Jesus without seeing how he served people in so many different ways. And because when I'd go home before I was a believer, and even when I was a young believer, I'd go home and Mom, wait on me. Here I am. Cook meals for me, wash my clothes, do all this stuff. And it was just horrible. But then I was taught to serve. And so I would serve. I'd come home, I'd do dishes, and I would help with whatever I could. Also, I think in terms of serving those other students that you know and love, is to pray for them and call them and encourage them in some way or another. I remember my mom saying that she knew that something took place in my heart because I came home and I served. Something was different. And if students want to have an impact on people, boy, one of the greatest ways to do that is be a servant.
Some greatness in the kingdom right there. So thanks, Dick. So Barry, bring us home. What will be on your heart for students?
Let me tell you a quick kind of a humorous thing that happened through this that I think has a spiritual application for each of us. I have a buddy who runs he's part of a pretty good sized company and pretty high up, and he was talking about a Zoom meeting that happened with several of the other managers and people he had on his team, and one of them didn't quite understand exactly how this all worked. And so he sits down in the morning, he's wearing his boxers and hairy chest and belly sticking out and sitting there with his coffee, and he has no idea that everybody else can see him and he's talking, and everybody's just like, oh my goodness. And he's like this big old 300-pound guy, and he's just all of him there. Thank goodness he was wearing his boxers at least. But all of a sudden someone messages and says, you do know we can see you. And he's shuts his computer. He was exposed and didn't even realize that he was exposed. And during this time, could I just challenge you guys to understand that you might not have realized that God knew everything. God sees everything. There's nothing that you can hide from him. And you might have thought, oh, I'm putting on a good face here, and then I'm doing this over here, or now I'm back home. I'm just kind of kicking back, and I've fallen back into some of the old patterns. But here's the thing, God has a way of using times like this to expose what our real foundation is. And that happens both in the follower and the non-believer. And I'm thankful for that, because I want to be a person of integrity. I want to have a foundation that is solid and real. And I want that for you guys. And so while you're at home, if this has exposed something in you that maybe was embarrassing, maybe you didn't really want people to see, well, press in on that, because God is still in the business of changing lives. And you don't have to be present with Christian Challenge. They have all kinds of support and prayers and encouragement. Reach out to those you went with and that you know. And if you're in a group of some sort, if you're not in a group, get in a group of some sort, or you get in contact and say, hey, let's start talking and praying for one another, because that matters. And I'm like, people are hungry right now for hope. And now it's just a matter of, will the church bring that hope? And are we going to stand on the hope we've been given? Because he's given us an incredible gift, and the gift of Jesus Christ through the cross that we just celebrated on Easter. So that's my prayer, is that you guys would just use this as an opportunity. Pray about who God might put on your heart. Reach out to them. Don't be afraid. And if they reject you, it's like Steve said, all of his prayer list, he reached out to them. Some didn't really like it. Some did, though. It's worth it for the ones who turn. There are people ready to turn if you'll be a voice.
Well, this has been so good. And thank you again so much. I'd like to pray for you guys and your ministries just to close us up. So let's pray together. Father, thank you for these men and for their hearts for you and their heart for their church and for students. We do pray that you would just continue to give them discernment and wisdom as they lead. And Lord, we thank you for just their words, and we do pray for, just for students during this time that Lord, that they would be really keenly aware of your nearness to them, and they would take opportunities to serve, that they would take opportunities to reach out and to talk about you, to share about you with their family, with their friends. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, thanks so much.
Hey, Christian Challenge. I hope you're so encouraged by what you just heard. It's Sean here again. Excited to worship with you. Before we do so, I wanted to read out of Psalms 34, starting in verse 8. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. Oh, fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him have no lack. The young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. What an amazing truth that if we seek the Lord, we will lack nothing, because the Lord provides for us exactly what we need. So I hope you're encouraged tonight, and I hope you can sing along. Let's sing Good Grace together.
Oh,
I hope it was encouraging to you and a blessing to you. I hope you're able to worship God. Again, like I said last week, love you guys, miss you guys. We'll see you very soon.